welcome to Stand Up Memories.
We have a legendary guest.
We do.
And he knew you were a professor.
He knew I was a professor.
See,
and
my memory.
You know that.
No, Jackie, see, I knew this guy. I have no trouble with names and nouns. But I mean, you know, the last thing I did, I have some movie that's out and I have no trouble memorizing lines. I'm going to retire, by the way, very shortly. But names and nouns. But the guy, I recognize his face. I know his name. And so I nailed it. This is quite a set because, you know, podcast, no offense intended, but I actually bumped into a guy yesterday in the supermarket who did not have a podcast.
I know who that is.
I wanted to preserve him because, you know, hey, you got a set. This is big time. I know that somebody's
Robert. That's a video wall. We're in the basement of a chocolate works. Not
is
to
that
spoil
so?
The whole
I
effect.
believe you. No, it doesn't matter. I have no pants on. My schmeckel is hanging on this chair. How's that?
That's the beauty of it.
That's
All
the
right.
beauty of. I began during the plague, when a wonderful theater group up here. I wound up doing a Zoom play with Alan Arkin. I had such a wonderful exchange with him. Unfortunately, we never got together personally at this end of his life, but we did a play together in this whole Zoom business. Then Joy Behar wrote 4 one-act plays, which we did for, you know, the benefit of the center in East Hampton, because they need the money in East Hampton. It's one of the poorer communities.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Zooming is a world of a whole different world. I've done a few of them, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. I don't think you need any introduction. I've been stressing over the introduction.
Well, I think you should do an introduction.
I should.
There are people.
And I am not a fanboy. I'm not going to act like a fanboy.
Why not?
I see nothing wrong with
Well,
that. I see him being nothing but flattered.
you
by
know,
I mean, these guys have to say, give a disclaimer. By the way, I'm not going to praise you or show in any way that I admire and adore you because of you. And you're the greatest,
Well, I've been thinking about this, and these words are thrown around, but you are, first and foremost, in my mind, a comedian, a stand-up comedian. And I'll say it once, and then we'll move on.
No. If it's praise, I want the entire show full of it. What is this bullshit with that? I'll just say this quickly. This is the second time you've offended me, Peter. And you're a great guy.
All right, I'm talking. You are a genuine comedy superstar and legend, and I will lead into my first sort of.
I don't think you mean it. I think you're just trying to be nice. Go ahead.
I do mean it, and I also wanted to add. I've been thinking about this, that you were in the vanguard of comedians in the 1960s who took comedy to a new level, much the way rock and roll was going to a new level in the 60s. More energy, more exploration of different types of material and topics. And
I would say he started it. Or am I wrong?
Well,
you know, the Chris Rushes and the Carlins and them, but didn't you precede them?
Hey, the Carlins and them? Hey, you're talking about royalty.
No, but
George and Richard Pryor were in show business ahead of me. They were both what Rodney used to call, I'll tell you, they're rounders, rounders. Yeah. Didn't exactly go to college, and all that.
Right.
I came along, and Richard, when I met him at the Improv and started, that's the first time I met him. He was doing Merv Griffin collegiately with a white sweater, fantastic, hilarious stuff, not the rough part that came later. The same as George with his hippy-dippy weatherman. They were both funny in both iterations, But he once commented we got our material similarly, although Pryor later worked with that guy who died, that writer, but it doesn't take anything away. The point is that I never saw Lenny Bruce in person, but it lit me up because he was pushing the envelope, not the junkie part and all that, but when he was sharp, when how to make colored people at parties comfortable and all these bits, and they were so hip and they were so interesting, and he was quick. And the other real tremendous inspiration was Jonathan Winters, because they're both, he and Lenny were one-man shows. They did voices. And I like that better than just monology, taking the stage. I wanted to be intelligent. I wanted to take it up a few notches. I love physical comedy and city. One of my best known things is a stupid joke. I can't stop my leg, but I just wanted to. Now they're saying all this stuff, and I started this. I know this much, and then I'll go back to you, Peter. I'm sorry, but it's Peter, right?
Yes.
Yeah. See, that's the problem. Anyway, in this documentary about me that Marshall find it's really beautiful, and I recommend it. I think it's streaming on a few things. It's called Robert Klein Still Can't Stop His Leg, and it was at the festivals and all that. But you got Stewart, Jay Leno, Seinfeld, Billy. If Robin hadn't killed himself, he would have been on there saying, Bill Maher copied my stuff down when he was a senior in high school to see it in print. So in that sense, none of them you could say is me any more than I'm Rodney, who I learned so much. He was my Yale Drama School for comedy after I met him at the Improv in the fall of '66. Here's best summed up in the movie. Jay Leno says, when you live in Western Massachusetts and you're in high school and you're into comedy, your mother's friends commiserate, is he still into that? And you could point to Robert Klein. He went to college, he was normal, blah, blah. You know what I mean? So that's the kind of thing I started. I think be intelligent. And profanity is an important part of the language. Great novelists use it. I used it in the first HBO special ever, the first original programming ever, which the 50th anniversary of which is coming up in 2025. I hope we can do a bye-bye 10th HBO special. But I said shit and I said fuck, I think, almost as a gag, and I've used it. I don't like it every other word. I think a lot of elegance is missing. Anyway, that was part of it too, not to be crystal clean, but to be elegant, to be clean, to be
you came out and you were not
I'm not gay.
Suit. No, that's what I mean. When you came out on stage, you were not in a suit. You were not coming right from the Catskills doing jokes or word puns. You were taking comedy in a new direction. That is quite significant what you did. And that new generation did.
Thank you. I did originally come out in suits. In fact, when I tried, no tie or something, I got Freddie DeCordova, the producer of the Tonight Show, said, "Johnny says wear a coat and tie."
Wow.
No, but I've also been. It's also been said of me that I'm a little bit of a connection. I'm Jewish, and there's a Borscht Belt element. I did bits about it. I didn't understand these Yiddish jokes that were done, but I've sort of bridged the two. There's a part of me that's old-fashioned show business. I've been in 7 Broadway shows and a few musicals and all that. So, but I wanted to just do something meaningful. It doesn't mean it can't be silly as well, but just to tie it up and entertain, and especially smart people. I didn't do exactly the same show at Harvard, at Sanders Theater in Harvard, that I did for 3,000 people outdoors at the 7 Flags of Georgia. These crew cut off-duty cops with their 2-year-old daughters on their knee. I left out the fag at the ball game routine. But I did. If I took the money, I had to make them laugh, and so I never said the opposite. I wasn't a hypocrite, but you know what I mean. I was versatile. It kept me working.
Yes, and
it's your job to make them laugh, and you just do it.
That's your job,
Speaking of that, I've seen many comedians who start out in comedy, and the minute they get any kind of an acting career going, they quit comedy and, oh, thank God I can quit comedy, and now I'm a full-time actor. And you were never that. You were never somebody who wanted to quit stand-up. And your resume, acting resume, and theater and TV is longer than a CVS receipt. That's how, you know, you're.
By the way, before I forget, there is a new film, and I promised the publicist, and it's a pretty good film. I saw it with is his name Dan Keegan, the one who played the husband on The Amazing Mrs. What's her name?
Mrs. Maisel.
He's terrific in this. Zegan, his name is. I play his father. It seemed like a thing. My last film, I figure it was in New York, not a big part, but an important part. An old Jew. Jesus, how did they cast me?
How did they cast you?
Actually, he's not necessarily Jewish, but you think he is. But anyway, it's called Notice to Quit. And it's about a guy, a day in his life, getting out of his apartment. It's really funny and mellow. And it'll be in theaters starting September 27th. You know what? I was trained as an actor. I did a year of graduate school at the Yale Drama School. Second City was the best. The best.
I was gonna bring that up. I was gonna do the joke that you went to a small community college in Connecticut called Yale.
I'm sorry to step on your line.
No. I've been
Yeah.
looking forward to talking to you.
You won't. Yeah,
I
you
love
won't. Yeah, I was talking. I'm sorry. That's it. But would have been a very funny game. And you would have delivered it. It sounded like you delivered it like me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I punched the punchline like Robert Klein.
You know what? Gary Shandling, I'm pretty sure was among them, but Woody, Steve Martin, Albert Brooks, they really didn't like stand-up. Albert cracked up practically in a club I once played once or twice called Paul's Mall in Boston. The urban legend is he was on stage and just said, I can't do this, and walked off, which I think is true. I mean, I may have even confirmed this with him. He didn't want to. And Woody, Charlie Jaffe and Rollins used to hold his head when he vomited. He was very nervous about it, and he became great at it. Shandling, I'm not sure, but I don't know why I think that of him. I always felt that it kept me working and interested to do everything. I didn't have to wait around for a part like actors. Being an actor, unless you're at the very tippy top and in constant demand, even the greatest, Brando and the others, had to take shitty films. I've been in a few that I could, So being a comedian, that's how I made my bones, and that's it. It fascinated me so much that the Lenny Bruce thing and Jonathan Winters, and of course every comedian I saw as a child on television, Red Buttons and Milton Berle, but these guys really clarified. And then when I met Rodney, I learned so much about construction of jokes. Nobody was writing their own jokes when I met him in the fall of '66, and he had just switched from Jack Roy to Rodney Dangerfield.
I didn't know you met him that early. That's really
I did.
Fun.
Yeah, wow. Because I was in my first Broadway show, the first one I ever auditioned for too. Mike Nichols directing, and I got the part with Apple Tree and the Schubert Theater on 44th Street. And I would, after the show, David Steinberg, my mate at Second City, told me about the improv, where you can't be an amateur like an open mic, but if you're a Broadway person or something, Bud Friedman will put you on. I went down there, and with Alan Alda and Barbara Harris, the whole cast, there were only 13 of us. It was beautiful, and I did great because I had, nurtured and created things at Second City. When I went on Hootenanny nights, when I was a substitute teacher before Second City, to the bitter end, first the Cafe Wa, I didn't have the discipline. I didn't have the knowledge, the maturity. I was talented, but it was raw. Anyway, a guy comes up to me, after the show. I'd never seen him before. And I killed him. I did about 15, 20 minutes. And he go, I'll tell you, man, you're fucking brilliant, okay? And I'm a tough cocksucker, he said. Years later, on This Is Your Life, David, who's the Englishman? David, he had a talk show. Frost.
David Frost.
You guys aren't that young, for Christ's sake. David Frost had two specials, This Is Your Life, Charlton Heston, and one was Rodney Dangerfield. So I was filming a movie in Florida. They surreptitiously got in touch with me, flew me out to Vegas to surprise them, Rodney, do you recognize this voice? And I said, and he came up and he said, you were brilliant, and I'm a tough customer. Wah, wah, wah. Anyway, and then he said, the more important thing, Rodney said, I'll tell you, now you have to come every day for 3 years to get it right, And I never had a bar like Cheers. I wasn't really a drinker. I was, I thought pot was much better, though you couldn't smoke it outside. And I started going to the Improv. And after the show was over, I'd take off my little makeup I had, and Jay Norman, this incredible dude that's in both West Side Story, the original cast on Broadway, Jerome Robbins, Ballet USA, and the movie. And believe me, this a stud, man. He was a tough dude from the South Bronx. We both would get a little high. He'd go off to cheat on his wife, and I'd go to do comedy. And then one day I go there, and there's this woman who I did not know. Did I know her yet? I don't think so. With her husband, with a tape recorder. I said, wait a minute, I got to do that. We did that at Second City. I'll do it. It was Joan Rivers and Edgar. And so the
that
technique,
is so cool.
Yeah, with his Paul Malls, he was a sad character. I thought he was doing great with her. I'll never know the secret of it. But I stubbed her in a movie, not in real life. But that's the closest I came. A terrible movie called A Ghost. And with Jennifer Tilly played my daughter. And I have to make love to Joan Rivers in this movie. She was, by the way, I thought she'd be a real shit because it was a $2 million budget. We didn't have great facilities in Winnebagos. We're shooting in New York. She was great, I got to say. I knew her for 45 years. And so I had to make love to her. And the rigging took 2 days. And for the orgasm, we brought in a stuntman from California. I made it into one of my best bits, she's a tremendous a multitasker. While we were making love, she sold me 4 bracelets, Anyway.
That's a great bit. Hey, Robert, a lot of young comedians watch this podcast. And I want to say one word to you, because you're talking about starting out at the Improv, 44th and 9th. One word, the young comics won't know what it means, but boy, were times different. Here's the word, Wolensack. How could you? It was heavy.
It was probably a little over 20 pounds. That's the only one I had. And many years later, I did a terrific gig. All I had to do was shake hands for the 10th anniversary of the Walkman. And Mr. What's his name? The one who started Sony. I can't remember his name now.
Sukiyaki.
Who?
I don't know.
No. But
that's
I'd like to know where he was December 7th, 1920.
Yeah.
I tried to explain to him the diminution in the size of recording devices, that not only people music on it, but comedians use it. I went from a Wolensack to a well-known brand, reel-to-reel, small reel-to-reel,
right,
which could be portable, to a Walkman, to ring, and finally, to telephones and all that. And yes, I used to lug the.
I can't imagine how heavy that was.
Well, both the theater and the Improv were on the same street.
Yeah.
The Schubert Theater was 44th. It was a 2-block walk, and I wasn't 82 with COPD. Yeah, Wallensack, right? You know, I have a what's that beautiful tape recorder down with a walnut, the real professional one. I can't remember the name of it anymore. It's in my basement. For what reason, I have no idea. I do have hundreds of little cassette tapes and all that. Yes, getting back to your question about 2 hours ago, yes, the versatility, acting, stand-up is acting, of course. And it's like any other profession, except when you're feeling blue. But then if you're a coal miner and feeling blue, you got to go to work too.
Right.
When I got a terrible divorce 35 years ago, it was like, ooh, it was tough to pretend to be funny. But yeah, 7 Broadway shows, over 40 features, lots and lots of film, television. I never wanted to do sitcoms until I got older. The only thing I regret is I accepted Night Court. It was the funniest script I had read in ages. And I didn't want to do a sitcom, but my career could have used it. It was 35 years ago or so. That little boost. I was in California for a while with my wife, who was an opera singer, and she had a good teacher. You want to stay in LA for 6 months. And I think basically Charlie Jaffe, one of my 2 managers, Rollins and Jaffe, their names are on all the Woody Allen films. He had been a genius deal maker for Woody. He was an amazing dude. But by this time, he was so coked up that I think in directing the agency, the manager's not supposed to negotiate directly. I think he blew the deal, and literally and figuratively. I think he kept on saying, they're not giving you enough. They're offering you, and they offered me a number, per episode. In those days, if you had a hit, they rip up the thing. You get, a huge thing. Now, the 2 series I did since 2001 to now, I did 2 series. They lasted 10 shows, right? Elliot Gould and I were the last one. He got all the great movie roles. And here I got these both. We're both out in the hallway. We both have signed a contract without the job for 7 years, telling you how much money each year. And believe me, they don't budge until you go on strike, like my dear friend Peter Boyle did with his crew, or the kids on Friends. They went on strike. Yeah. But basically, that's the way it became. And I got both of those jobs and those moments with Elliot in the hall. Neither of us were that nervous. We're old hands, but it's ridiculous. Anyway, that was my big regret, not taking it. I did turn down the Wayne Rogers role in MASH.
Wow.
I did know that, and you are now clickbait on Apple News the other night. Facts you never knew about MASH, and I'm stupid. I clicked on it, and I saw that, and I wasn't going to mention it, but you've mentioned it.
I never mentioned it. Well, Wayne Rogers died some years ago. Certainly not when he was alive. And I have mentioned it since he died. He only stayed 1 year, but I have mentioned it since he died. But I was on Alan Alda's podcast last year, and he was surprised at it too. And the reason was simple. I read for the movie, which I thought was a masterpiece. Like a lot of young actors who I never really moved to LA. I kept an apartment and all that, but I thought it was great. And I wasn't crazy about sitcoms. And I had no doubt it would be a hit. It was bigger than a hit, but I have no regrets about that because I was hot as a pistol as a comedian. I had no eyes to locate to LA at that time. And I never thought the show approached the movie.
Right.
They're 2 different things. You couldn't, and it's not only cursing, you know what I mean? The whole idea of it. In fact, when I read the script of the movie, I said, they're going to allow this, all the blood and the gore, times have changed a lot. So that's it. Also that I haven't played Hamlet.
No.
But
the English actors have the advantage when they're casting Hamlet.
That's right. That's one of my best bits. The actors.
I know it is. I'm setting you up.
Peter, you're a dog. Thank you.
I love it.
I'm a little out of practice. Johnny was great at that. Merv Griffin was the nicest guy and one of the richest guys. He owns 30, he had a fleet of airplanes, private jets for hire. I used to talk about airplanes with, but he stepped on your joke.
That's
He had
That's
no
what I
idea
do.
where you were going, and he just, invaded your space. I don't have to do the bit, but talk
Robert.
about unions. I get a nice pension.
Yeah.
Brett Stevens in the Times the other day. He's a brilliant guy. One of these conservatives, he's anti-Trump, but he said he doesn't think unions are best for workers. Give me a break, will you? You know, when unions were king, people worked at General Motors. They had 2 cars in the garage, 3 kids in college.
Couldn't agree more.
Great. And we
Could
all
not agree more. You're leading right into something I want. I watched live The Tonight Show when you came on and you were talking about Watergate, and it was fascinating and it was funny. And at the end of it, Johnny said words to the effect of, we have to take a break now. We'll be right back while we get the lawyers to work on this. And I wanted to mention in this podcast, nobody else on The Tonight Show was doing segments like that.
I had to fight them every inch of the way. I had a joke about Spiro Agnew, who was a real classy character, taking $1,500 bribes, the governor of Maryland, for these construction things.
Yeah.
And he pled nolo contendere. And, I had a bit about it. It was a very good bit. And Freddie DeCordova just kept on saying, you know what, he didn't let me know, and I found out he's tight with Spiro Agnew. I liked Freddie too, but he was an old fucking millionaire Republican, and he said, "Oh, you could be in legal jeopardy." I said, "Freddie, he pled nolo contendere." I had to fight for every word. That's why HBO was the most magnificent. First of all, they never edited one word.
Right.
A pitcher like me, I had content and complete control of my work from the start, even when I didn't own the shows originally. And I was just talking. I had lunch the other day with Michael Fuchs, who was not the first head of HBO, but really made it grow. And that company is falling apart now. And Marty Kullner, who is now a tremendous star in the directing and producing. He does Hard Knocks. He did Richard Pryor, and he did a lot of big bands and all that. Well, he directed the first one that I did, that the anniversary is coming up with, at Haverford College. His only experience was directing Boston Celtic games. He didn't know anything about comedy. And we told him how I patrol the stage. I never stand still. I'm all over the place. So he was afraid of close-ups. Maybe we used 3 cameras at the stage then, I'm not sure. We perfected it. We started the whole thing of before the, backstage, the encounter, everything. Well, we had an emotional phone call the other day. I hadn't talked to him in 10 years or so. He said, everything started there. I owe everything to you. I didn't know anything about comedy in it. He's the superstar. So one of the things about my career is that, I was there at the very beginning of cable television. There was absolutely no such thing as original programming. Cable consisted of little regional cable companies that chose sports. In New York, they had the Knicks games and their movies. You could see a movie 3 months after it was in the theater with all the cursing and complete in your house. That was the thing. Until a guy named Harlan Kleiman called Rollins' office and said, I'd like to do one of Robert's college concerts and put it on HBO. They had about 400,000 subscribers in Eastern Pennsylvania, Manhattan, and Long Island. That was HBO. They had 20 employees. They called it home box office.
It started down the street from here, literally down the street from here.
Well, they moved from 43rd Street there. Where are you?
Charles Dolan's original place was in Jericho, Long Island, and the first test group was like a half-mile radius around, he had this idea, he's going to show old movies on television, and everybody told him he was crazy, and then he owned the world.
Well, that's Dolan's father, the
Jimmy
Nick guy.
Dolan's
Yeah,
father,
yeah.
James Dolan's father.
James Dolan's father. So I mean, I was asked to be a consultant on what they called Comedy Channel, and I even had a show because I love vintage comedy. If you ask me what my favorites are, I just got off a Buster Keaton kick.
Yeah.
A Chaplin, W.C. Fields, the Marx Brothers. I did the Marx Fest a couple of months ago with Jason Zinnerman from the Times. That stuff excites me. Laurel and Hardy and all that. Anyway, so I had a show called Dead Comic Society with these pristine prints of Laurel and Hardy and Chaplin and this and that, mostly talkies, but some silent. No, I would explain what they are. It didn't happen. But I guess the interesting thing is it's at the very beginning of cable, and streaming is a form. You could say cable. It isn't cable anymore, but there were 3 networks when I started, and I'm 82, and I've been working for 60 years. Fred Willard and I, the great Fred Willard.
Wow.
Yes.
Everyone I know is dead. Fred and I reported for work on Wells Street, Second City in Chicago, in March of 1965. We were hired together. We didn't know each other. There were 20 people in the William Morris audition room in New York. Billy D. Williams was among us. He didn't get the job. I only realized later. And Fred and I, he paired us off, I guess. Sheldon Patinkin, who was directing then, that's Mandy's cousin. And he asked us to do an improv, gave us a subject. Fred and I did an improv and got the job.
Hey, Robert,
Wow.
I actually teach comics who want to try it, dip their toe into stand-up. And I always tell them, and you are proof, that improv and stand-up are close cousins, and having improv experience can really be good for you as you develop as a comedian. And I think I heard you just agree with that.
Oh, well, for me, Second City there were 2 disciplines involved. One is multiple performance. In college, I did 4 performances of The Merchant of Venice, or 5. In Second City, you did the same show every night, like on Broadway. And
Right.
believe me, that is hard.
That is hard.
The other thing is the improv. After the regular set of the set pieces, and we were always producing new, maybe we did 3 or 4 shows a year, changing them, the improv part. Now, to point out that there's certainly huge, there are exceptions. A good one is George Carlin. George, the way George worked is like a playwright. The stage manager at his HBO show knew the first word and the last word. And I don't recall, I mean, he's quoted all the time in all these brilliant things. I never saw him that I know improvising. I'm sure he was witty and all that, but he did it by putting it down and perfecting it. And there's nothing wrong with that, as seen by so much of his work was so brilliant. I didn't like the suicide shit at the end, that darkness. His daughter claimed that but she's a sweetheart, Kelly, that it wasn't because Brenda died, it just whatever. But she turned out okay. It was really tough. I read her book, man. It was a toughie. So there are exceptions to that, but improvise on your toes. See, I'm the opposite, and I get an idea, I'll write it down, a word, and then I'll try it, or it blurts out of me, comes out of me. Paul Sills, the original director of Second City, with whom I also worked, used to say, there's nothing like the explosion of the laughter to a true improvisation. It's just, and also
Yeah.
children are the greatest improvisers till about 5 when we fuck them up. But, the freedom. No, he has a certain, my granddaughter is 18 months and there's all this world of things. And then you begin to inhibit a little, which is okay. You can't just do anything you want anytime you want. But I agree. I think it's a wonderful, I'm glad it's considered an art. I was not quite at the beginning of that, but close. Before me, there was Alan Arkin, Barbara Harris, Paul Sand.
Nichols and May.
Nichols and May were with the
Committee, right? Am I right?
not the committee. The committee was an offshoot of Second City in San Francisco that later.
Okay.
It was called the Compass.
Ah.
And there were a bunch of people from University of Chicago, Ted Asner among them.
Wow.
And that really weird dude who was so funny. He died much too young. Severin Darden.
Yes.
And Mike and Elaine. And I did a movie for him too. I idolized him.
Yes.
I did Primary Colors. And I mean, they were fantastic, and Jack Rollins managed them too. He could always spot class. And then in that office, Buddy Mora worked for them. And within a year space, they discovered Robin, Billy, and Letterman. How's
Not
that?
bad.
Not bad.
Not bad.
Yeah.
I wanted to cover this. You have an advantage. You still do, and you always have, over many, many, many comedians, in that you have significant musical talent. You can carry a tune, you play an instrument, you would end your shows, and this is remarkable, with maybe you got this at Second City, something called Make a Song. And I was at Northwestern University in 1976 and saw you and Standing Ovation Encore and Make a Song and Phil Galston Phil Galston on piano, everybody. And I worked with you later, and you had Bob Stein.
We're still working together 40 years.
Oh, well,
although we're going to retire. But.
he is wonderful and funny to talk to, and he's great. And he told me that you are so good at Make a Song that you had to stop doing it because people thought it was fixed. It was set up. They call out book titles and he makes a song out of it. And it's so amazing and it really is improv, and they think it's fixed. They weren't buying. It wasn't fixed.
Yeah. We used to, I got it at Second City. Bill Matthew was the original pianist there, and then Fred Kaz, the only two for years and years. They were great at it. With Matthew, I did a lot of Handelian and Bach cantata kind of stuff and blues. And yes, Bob is absolutely right. We actually stopped it. It didn't seem sensational anymore. People laughed, but you could tell they didn't realize how fucking brilliant.
No, but
and therefore, so can you imagine? I was only married 16 years, divorced 33. Bob and I working together 40 years. Phil Goldston was my original accompanist, followed by Ray Johnson, who Billy Saluga and that gang used in their bit. You can call me Ray.
Yeah.
You can call me Jay. He's African-American jazz man. And I had dinner with him just a few years ago. He moved back to Kentucky, to Louisville, and he was a wonderful man and a wonderful pianist. And Bette Midler owes so much to him because he played behind her every day while she worked out, this and that. And we traveled together for, we stayed in separate hotels, of course. I was referring to Willie Mays having to stay. No, we worked together, traveled together a couple of years. Then Stan Schwartz, who was Melissa Manchester's music director. I'm still friends with him. He's having an 80th birthday. Great musician. And then Bob Stein. And Bob, Eastman School of Music. he wrote charts for symphonies. I don't know how many comedians you know have worked with symphonies.
Whoa.
Almost in the Victor Borger kind of category. I have pride in that. He wrote charts for huge numbers. And after when he joined me, maybe it was by the fourth HBO special, they were a total of 9. He convinced them to let him be producer, and he produced all the rest. He's incredibly versatile. He brought it in on budget. You know, you're talking about a lot of money going down, and he's marvelous. And I hope we do this last one. But, you know, it's been great. We got along all these years. He calls me country.
And you love the harmonica, and you bring the harmonica into.
Yes, I was hoping you'd ask.
There it is.
This was invented by Germans. And they found out if you blow out, it sounds German, like a polka. You get it? But then some African American was sitting down in Mississippi, and he was tired from a tough day at work. He took out his harp, and he just took a deep breath in. He didn't want no polka. He wanted. Whoa! I was a slave in Florida, but I learned to be an accountant. You see, slavery, the joke, they learned things during slavery, including accountancy.
Hey, and harmonicas, you can use them in hospitals, he said, setting up a routine.
One time I put it in my mouth and I breathed in and out, and it's so relaxing. It really is. Really. Jackie, I have to include you in this. You've been so laid back, and you've been in the sun too long. Beautiful
I'm
suntan.
fascinated. You know,
You have a beautiful sun. You grew up. I remember you as a wild young man. I just breathed, and the harmonica played a tune that reflected my breathing. I thought to myself, this will make a hell of a nurse's aide. Instead of a computer, beep, 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 but then you put one of these in his mouth with the Bob Dylan official neck holder, and you can hear how he's breathing, go away, play cards. Any problem, you hear right away, musically. Code Blue, Dr. Klein, Dr. Mode, Dr. Larry, Dr. Curly. You know, I conducted an evening once in the New York Comedy Festival at Town Hall devoted to the Three Stooges, who I do admire. I have the complete collection. I just reviewed it again. The production values went from huge Hollywood, and you noticed that, right?
Yes.
In 35, when they signed with Jack, what's his name, Cohn at Columbia, and at the end there was like a schlocky hallway. That was it. I had Mo's son and daughter, who were UCLA graduates, Beverly Hills grandparents, elegantly dressed, well-educated. Mo Howard was a wonderful father. He used to run home from the studio. The other two were rounders of sorts. Jerome was, you know, clubby and pulling out the tablecloth in a nightclub and paying for the broken dishes. And Larry Fine's kid sister, was an old Jewish lady sitting there, who unfortunately for her looked exactly like Larry from the Three Stooges.
I've heard that.
You know, it's genetic lock certainty. But to see this woman, I had to keep it in. And they're telling me Mo's son and daughter Oh, Dad was just wonderful, and they're so elegant with it, and Dad, and it was all I could do to keep from taking my pinkies and putting it right in and yet I love that about, contemporary show business doesn't interest me so much, especially as I'm sort of, like pulling back. I'm a grandfather. I've had it already. I love hearing about the personal lives of these people and to always be disappointed that they weren't perfect. I once had breakfast with Groucho. Can I tell you the story?
Yes.
Yeah. There was a big spread of me in the arts and leisure section of the Times. It's a very intelligent article. I was touring with one of my albums, and I was playing a lot of theaters, and it's like a new vaudeville, the way he said it, playing theaters. Many of them were old movie theaters that no longer showed movies and all this. Anyway, it was around that time that I hosted for the first time the Johnny Carson show. I guess I wound up about a total of maybe 15 times. And I get a letter from Groucho Marx. Wow. He says, Bernadette Peters was on, one of my guests, and she was cute, but she was talking about cockroaches and all that. And the audience wasn't responding, and I gave a little lift and whatever. I was good with her. And he said, boy, you saved that girl with the cockroach. I didn't save her, but anyway, he said, I tell you, it was so funny. I laughed so hard, I almost fell off my secretary's knee. And he said, next time you come to LA, give me a call and I'll give you dinner, give you dinner, I think he said. And if I really like you, I'll give you breakfast too, he said. So I go out to, the next time I went, it was fairly soon, to do Love American Style with Howard Da Silva, wonderful man, blacklisted. For those of you who don't know, he was Benjamin Franklin in 1776. And for those of you that don't know 1776, it happened to be the year that they say we started as a country. Anyway, I go out there and we're going to be shooting at night. It's going to be tough to have dinner. And I called Groucho and I said, Robert Klein, you remember you could? I remember. Anytime I would introduce myself to old people by saying my name, even though I'd met them before, they seemed almost defensive, like George Burns. And yeah, I know, Carl Reiner. Yeah, I know. So I said, Groucho, you said you'd give me dinner. I said, but we're shooting at night here. I'm at Paramount and shooting at night. And he said, well, can you come to dinner? I said, well, no, we're shooting at night. He says, can you come to dinner? So I don't know if it's these mini strokes or he's putting me on. I think he was putting me on. After 3, can you come to dinners? And I'm shooting at night. I say, well, you said if you really like me, give me breakfast. He said, come for breakfast. So I went to his house in Beverly Hills. It was not in the flats. It was up in the hills. It had been beautiful property. It was a little rundown, There's a gorgeous nurse, not in any nurse's uniform. And he's got a hospital type bed, but he's out of it. These pajamas, going like silk pajamas, chasing this cat. Come here, Blackie, come here. We had wonderful imported jam and boiled eggs, and we talked and talked. And he points next to his bed, his honorary Oscar and a picture of Erin Fleming, his girlfriend. She was about 33. He was well into his 70s. And people knew him like Cavett. And everyone said she really gave him a few extra years of life. He told me, I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't fuck, he says. But he said, if I had to give one of these back, and he points to the Oscar and the picture of her, you know which one it would be? And he points to the Oscar. After a couple of hours with him, like I said to him, what's the definitive book about the Marx Brothers? Is it Harpo Speaks? And he goes, Harpo didn't write that, And it's true. And I was very disappointed in it because there was a lot of, Harpo may have been a darling of the Algonquin intellectual set in the Algonquin Hotel with all those wonderful people, Monty Woolley and all those. But he wasn't really an intellectual. Groucho was a true autodidact who was pulled from school in the 6th grade and resented it. Groucho was literate. He read extensively, and then she came home. She was in New York on Groucho T-shirt business or something, and she comes in the door, and this guy lit up. It was beautiful, and I took my leave, and that was my thing with Groucho Marx.
Wow. That's
Well, we have blown through through our time limit. We got
your haircut is like Cary Grant when he was old. It is.
Well, I'll take that as a compliment. We got 2 podcasts out of this. I've been resisting being the pompous professor here and saying to Robert
Please be
Klein,
the professor.
Okay, I'll be the pompous professor. I know
I'm sorry we have to go. I haven't said that to Robert Klein.
No, I want to say, I know you lived your life, but I've studied it and analyzed it, and I know more than you do about your life. You are a primary source, and I could listen forever. And you know why I feel so good right now?
We've been doing this for 5 seasons, and he has never been this exciting.
You know why I feel really good? Because you're sitting there and you look great and you seem in a good space.
Centered.
And you're centered and in a good space and feeling good and you're still going. And that I just
Can I have 2 more? Can I have 2 more minutes?
You can have as long as you want.
You can make 2 or 3 podcasts if you want. I just want to say a couple of things. My life has changed with my son and his wife moving up from Brooklyn and having a child. And they had it when they were 40 and 39, like I did. I was 41 when he was born. He's my only son, Allie Klein. It's very stereotypic, but especially at my age, this little girl is just, it's wonderful. They're here, they live, they bought a house maybe 15, 20 minutes away. I even gave up my apartment in New York a couple of years ago, which I kept. I've been living up in Westchester on the Hudson River Valley for 35 years. I consider myself a dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker. I just wanted to say election day is coming. And sometimes I think I'm glad I'm old because I'm very nervous about, I've read extensively and continue to read extensively about American history. I studied it in college. In fact, I have my bachelor's degree in the history of political science. It was so stupid what I learned in history. It was scratching the surface. It was nothing. I've learned, did I know simple things like Fort Bragg and all these statues of Robert E. Lee? All these people were traitors, you understand. And that's what they were considered after the Civil War. Lincoln's assassination, I still can't joke about it. It's one of the most horrible things ever happened, not just to him because he was an extraordinary man, but it changed history. Because after 30 years or so, the old racism kind of set in again. All these statues and Stone Mountain carved in that people of color have to pass every day, that and they have to see a traitors in a Stone Mountain. These were all late 19th century, early 20th century. Woodrow Wilson was a hero of my youth. He was a racist. We are in a crisis now because the goalposts have moved so far that an extraordinary thing happened that you would almost question if it was a novel. I think you would question, and that is the rise of Trump. And I blame partly your old boss or your old colleague, Howard. I mean, not all the blame. What's her name? The gossip columnist from the Post, whose husband was not funny, remember?
Cindy Adams.
Cindy Adams. All these people, the minute he said that Obama was not born here, I know I saw him at a party at Radio City and I turned my back on him. I knew him a little. Like, he asked me to be at the opening. I have to pass his golf course every day here. And they asked me to come to the opening 20 years ago, and I did. somebody sent me in a roast, and I hate roasts. I haven't done them in years. I thought they were cruel. I'm making stupid hair jokes and all that. The minute he said that, that would be enough for New York to say, "Hey, that's it. You're out." I mean,
It should have been enough.
it should have been enough right then, because America is, I'm sad to say, too many people are stupid. And stupid in the sense that they are completely ill-informed and incurious, and they don't know history. My father used to say, "What are you studying there?" Say, "History, political." "Can you make a living with that?" "Well, I'm taking shoemaking 101. I mean, it worried him. And
Yeah.
it's never been more valuable, and it's not being taught. History, civics, how the government works. And this includes world history as well. I've been doing, I met Holocaust survivors my whole life. My family was here. My unreligious Jewish grandparents came from Hungary in 1903. So I was safe. We lost no one in the Holocaust. But I knew survivors all my life with tattoos in the mountains, working as a lifeguard, all the rest. I read, but never as intensively as I've read since the plague these last few years. I read 4 hours a day. I don't want to hear genocide in a terrible war like Gaza, okay? That's war. And when your enemy hides, now, Netanyahu is a disgrace to the tradition of Israel as a secular democracy, because it's not secular anymore. You got these guys who never have to fight, never have to do anything. They pray all day, and they're running the place. There should be Palestinians have a voice. And after all these years, yes, of course, they could never take yes for an answer. I don't want to hear the word genocide and Holocaust, because the only genocides that are genuine was the 6 million Jews and the few other million destroyed by the Germans, who kept excellent records. I don't want to hear Tucker Carlson talking to a guy who has glasses and looks like he has something to say, that they were killed as POW. The Germans kept impeccable records. They had factories set up for babies, women, and men to get off the train. 5,000 were killed within 1/2 hour. They could have them dead and headed for the furnaces. The Armenians were the victims of a genocide, which the Turks will not cop to. It was 900,000, but that's a lot of murder. There's genocidal behavior in Africa. There's horrible war crimes, not genocide, being perpetrated by the Russians right now. And buildings like the Grand Concourse in the Bronx are being leveled every day. I don't see marching. So as a Jew, I have to say they never cared. Jews could not escape Europe because no one would take them. The Brits wouldn't take them. We wouldn't take them. Central America wouldn't take them because they're Jews. And I think Jews will always be singled out. Now, Jews have advanced so much in the world, especially this country. They're part of the power structure. People don't even ask. I think anti-Semitism, this late shuffle of anti-Semitism, I'm not so worried about that, because I think, we got these people on our side that I wish wouldn't, but these evangelicals, they're crazy about Israel and Jews and all that. I'm saying it's important that Trump not be elected, okay? Because he's garbage. And, I think we have projected on our side too much the idea of transgender. And look, I had a guy walk in I knew from Yale. He's a woman, and he's brilliant. He didn't do this because I think I'll be a woman today, or I think I'll be gay today, or whatever it is. But in the minds of many good people who would vote for Trump, that's the forefront. My grandchild is going to go into a toilet and a guy's going to come in. So we have to find a way to make people understand that things evolve.
You know what that way is? And I'm very disappointed we couldn't get Robert to open up today at all. And this is very interesting new bit that you're working on. Seriously though, you know what we have to do is we have to teach history and civics, and you said it. And I teach for the City University of New York at a place called Queensborough Community College.
I performed there. It's lovely.
Yeah. And I teach American history and I teach American government and politics. And you've gotten right to the core of what we need to do as a society, which is remind young people that you cannot understand the present unless you understand the past. And you cannot predict the future unless you are aware of what's going on in the present and understand the past. And for God's sake,
But all
vote.
that said, the main thing is Trump has got to go. No two ways about it. That is the linchpin to the entire thing.
And Robert, I wrote a book about American history to introduce it to young people.
What's
And
it called?
It's called, it's called exactly what we're talking about. It's a joke, but I was on a tour of Gettysburg National Park with a small group and a tour guide, and a woman raised her hand and said to the tour guide, "How come they always had the battles in National Park?"
Which
And
you couldn't make that up.
now I'm looking for at least she's interested. But imagine, and part two of the book, the second half of American history, was something a student said to me on the first day of class, which we just had. But this was a few years ago when I'm talking about how important history is. She looked at me cranky about all the work she's going to have to do this semester and said, "Who cares? They're all dead anyway." This is what we're fighting against. We've got to educate our young people.
The voting rolls are, the number of people that don't vote is disgraceful. I have a trainer I've been working with for 35 years, 3 times a week. It's wonderful. We're friends. He's completely apolitical, never voted in his life. I'd call him an idiot, but he's not. But, you know, he said, Battle of the Bulge. Is that, and he had the wrong war by 100 years. Democracy is very delicate. That's a key point. It's been tried very few times in history, in recorded history. I remember in my core at Alfred University, the core thing that everyone had to take when they were there, in the liberal arts college, we left the Greeks, it was depressing. They actually had democracy. The Romans flirted with it. The poor Russians never had it. They had it for a few years and they go lockstep back to a totalitarian. You'd think Hungary and Germany and these places that had terrible suffering from totalitarian or monarchies would not go back again. So it's a very depressing statistic. I'm slightly paraphrasing, but it's something like 53% of young people think that democracy may not be the best method. It's pretty delicate, you know.
Very, very delicate.
But we all came up in it, so we just accepted it, and that's the way it was.
And we have to teach it, and we have to keep harping on how important history is. Here's me in my class just this morning. Get off your phone. Stop texting. Listen to me. This is important. This is important. And for God's sake, register to vote. Vote.
Yeah, vote and get out there. And also, you know, just, I can't even deal with people who
It's hard. And I tell my students.
I did Mike Binder's, I did a film fan. He's in my documentary. He's a big fan. Afterwards, Dan Pasternak, my dear friend who knows everything about comedy, great writer of history of comedy and commenting on it, pointed out that Binder was a fan of Bobby Kennedy. I wouldn't have done the damn thing. I said, why didn't you? I let loose on Bobby Kennedy because he's a family friend, was a family friend. My son's mentor. It's tragic for us what he went into. I can't even, you know, I can't,
Wait,
I don't want to know anyone who.
He didn't like Bobby Kennedy, or what about?
He did a turnaround.
Bobby Kennedy Jr., Robert Kennedy Jr.
Robert Kennedy, he had a problem with Robert Kennedy.
My son's mentor, he's my family friend. He's my friend. I was at the funeral of his wife who hung herself.
Oh, I thought
disgrace.
I thought you were talking about one of my idols besides Robert Klein, Robert Kennedy.
Father should have been. Father would have been a wonderful president. Father would be turning in his grave if such a thing were possible. His family it feels that he's a disgrace.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Anyway, I'm just saying, I just can't tolerate, you know, or people say, I'll vote for Mickey Mouse, or, you know, this is different than Republican or Democrat it ever been. It's are we're going to destroy the country? Look at the scumbags on January 6th, and people defend them, and looking at that's the frightening one, not the Trumps and these morons like Taylor Greene and those others. It's the straights, Senator Cornyn from Texas and Lindsey Graham, who let his friend,
I gotcha.
one of the truly American heroes, although I disagree with all his politics, a man who was tortured for 6 years, John McCain, let him be. I like guys that weren't, Mr. Bone Spurs. I mean, not that I was anxious to serve either. I in graduate school, but I'm not saying I know that McCain was a hero. He could have been let go.
I would like to take a hit of a joint and just move it toward the screen.
Well, I already had an edible, so I don't need it.
You know what? I first of all, we're on the same page, and you are wonderful. I want to
I really have had a good time, and
I want to do something.
I think Martling talked too much, but other than that,
I'm sorry. This is on me. This is on me. Because you're my guy.
Hey, Jackie? Why didn't I didn't approve of what Howard did. I sort of admired him. He also said in his book that he got his first job by doing one of my routines, and he would often praise me on a show. I never did it again. And my manager at the time, Rory Rosegarden, he's not my manager anymore. He said that they had a meeting and the staff, and they didn't know who I was or something like that. Maybe criticizing him annoyed him, did it?
I left there so long ago.
Oh,
yeah, he's not good at handling any kind of criticism or anybody trying to steer the ship, unless you take him behind the scenes and give him an idea and then come back out and it's his idea, then it's fine to change courses.
Yeah, I thought he was very nice. Yeah.
When you were on the show, it was always stellar, but some of it was, when you fought with your wife and stuff. Unfortunately, it was great radio, but I don't know how good it was for you. But you mean in later years?
No, I used to say things like, what the outrageous things he would do. I was not a listener, but I knew how powerful it was because disparate people would say, did you hear what Howard Stern said? Hey, man, that man is too cool. And then an old Jewish cab driver, when such things existed, did you hear the latest that Howard Stern said? I knew that this guy has influence. I wish he would have turned around years before and really, because I guess Trump made good radio too, talking about stooping his own daughter. But anyway, I just he was pity patted too long. At that, to me, in New York, for him to make that public thing that he was born in Kenya, that's real. That's Alabama. That's Alabama, Mississippi stuff. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's moved to Ohio and other places, but the Confederacy still sucks. I hate it. And with all the government largesse they get in terms of military posts and rocket building and Boeing, you think it's a coincidence that Boeing's quality zoomed down when they're getting non-union work in South Carolina? You want to be on a plane that this guy put together?
I love it, but we have to wrap up.
Listen, I'm very offended. You're throwing me off the air.
No,
I'm a Jew.
We are on the same wavelength. Don't hang up right away.
There's anti-Semitism involved here. All right.
Yeah, but that's coming from me, not him.
Okay. We
would love to do a sequel.
What do you do for your finale? I don't want to interfere with your.
No, we're going to have a lot of time with you here. So I wanted, with the stand-up memories, and we talk to stand-up comedians and share history and memories, and that was pretty heavy. But I we're on the same page. Believe me, Jackie and I are on the same. We talk all the time about this. Now, I wanted to end on a joke, and I was actually affected when you said that you still get upset when you think or read about the assassination. We're ending on a joke about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. All right. And that was something in American history because you know who we replaced Lincoln with. Honest Abe was replaced with Andy the Drunken Tailor. That was his nickname. And Reconstruction, of course, was a disaster in many ways. So sometimes people use comedy when it's so bad that they can't deal with it. They can't talk about it seriously. They have to use comedy. And the ultimate joke for that, in my mind, is, and you know, I think you both know what I'm getting at, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the show? Is a way of dealing with something so tragic that the only thing you can do is laugh at.
Yeah, I guess. I know. I can't say I break down, but I like Family Guy a lot, and
Yeah.
he oversteps his bounds only a few times. And JFK assassination things are difficult for me too. Listen, I'm getting an echo. I think
Yeah, we're getting an echo.
your rent isn't paid.
So anyway,
Should we say
let's
goodbye.
just no, well, hang on, because they want to do a 15-second stinger with you.
Okay,
But
sure.
let's do our, this has been Robert Klein, and all the accolades he deserves. Journalism professor would call him a primary source and then distort everything he says, probably. But thank you, man. You came on, and the names and the memories, thank you for sharing. Thank you for,
I do think I should tell you that Epi is still alive and well and putting on shows, I swear. The first time I met you, we were in a room somewhere, and I said, what do I say to Robert Klein to introduce myself? And I walked up to you and said, Epi says hello. And you said, how much does he owe you?
I was kidding. I never knew him to be this honest. He was very nice, and we all did cocaine then. I remember I leaped into somebody threw a pencil at me. These two guys wouldn't shut up in the first row of my father's place, and I actually,
yeah.
And I'm not a physical hero. I leaped like Superman head first at these two guys. Somebody was videoing it on home video. It was the culmination of stupidity.
Well, that sounds like
cocaine was
great
about
story.
the biggest waste of time of all. Boy, that was really a waste. We read Conan Doyle and Freud and thought it wasn't habit forming, and how bad it could be. It makes you feel, but whoa, what a waste of time. Mostly spending time with people who had it because they had it, and having to spend time with them when you would never spend 4 seconds with them. It was
Robert Klein, ladies and gentlemen.
all right.
All right.
What's
No,
the stinger?
I think that you have solved all of our world problems.
And
I
we would
hope so.
like to do this
We'd
again.
love to do it again. We scratched the surface.
No, I'm
really.
very happy. You did a formidable job. I enjoyed it very much. I did.
And
Thank you.
you're wonderful, and I don't want your leg to ever stop.